Hello, welcome to, we just passed the initial setup now. This is week 7, and what we're looking at is setting up our logical network diagram, which you can see on the desktop here. We've had a discussion in the class, and this is the logical network diagram for putting the Get Well medical practice into a virtual environment. So just describing this, we have this network card going out to the normal TAFE system. This second network card we're going to attach to an actual Wi-Fi unit, which we can use our phone to connect to. On the inside, we're going to bridge the Ether00 card, or the first network card, on this 0 shell, which is going to act as our ADSL router, and we bridge that to the first network card that goes out to the internet. The second network card on this is going to go to an internal switch, and that internal switch will host server A, server B, the VoIP server, and the NAS box. Server A is going to connect to the printer, which is physically located out in the Wollongong West lab switch, but we'll do a TCP/IP to make it local and then share it to the rest of the network. We have a second router here, and we're going to put RIP between these two routers. This router here separates switch 2 from switch 1, and our Windows 10 machine is going to attach to switch 2. There's a third network card on this router, which will be bridged to the second network card to get out to the wireless clients. So the wireless clients and the wired clients will all be connected to this switch, this router, and then that'll be routed through to where the infrastructure is, and then out to the internet. This Windows 10 machine can be detached from switch 1, could be attached to detached from switch 2, and could be attached to switch 1, in which case we're going to put DHCP on server A so it would get an IP address. Otherwise we'll get a DHCP address from this router. The other place that it could go to is the bridge to our physical network card, in which case it would get an IP address from our NAS FG47, and we'll use that as an external client. So he's been working inside, he's done a home visit, he's gone outside, and he'll create a VPN tunnel and come back in and access the exchange and things like that. So that's the plan for moving our Windows 10 machine around. And we've got a subnet in here of 10.x /24 subnet. Switch 2 is 20.x with a /24 subnet, and the wireless will be a 30.x /24. Our server A will be an Active Directory server with DNS, DHCP and SQL on it. Our server B will be a web server with Exchange, and then we've got our VoIP and our NAS. And we'll use RAID on some of these things to make it into a proper NAS box. The gateway on this will be 10.1 obviously. These are all on the 10 subnet. And normally these are static IPs, they're infrastructure. We don't want their IP to change, they should always stay the same. Whereas Windows 10, when it's plugged into switch 2, will be getting its IP address from the DHCP on this network card, and it will get a random IP address within the range. Okay, so that's an explanation of the current logical network diagram, the way that we're going to set up the Get Well Medical in our virtual environment. So if we just open up our VirtualBox, it's already open. I'm going to get rid of all of the existing virtual machines. Right mouse click and then remove them all and delete all the files. So they're all gone. We're now going to make our ADSL, and it's a Linux operating system with a 32-bit, but we're going to make it the 2x, 3x, 4x, so most widely compatible kernel support. Next. We're going to leave this at 256. You can actually go down to 128. I've actually had it running in 96, believe it or not. Okay, so we'll create a virtual disk now, VDI format so that it's native, dynamically allocated, so we're only using the amount of disk space that we need, and it suggests 8 gigabytes. That's quite fine. We'll create it. Now we need to change the setup on this to include a second network card. So right mouse click in settings, general, advanced, we don't need to change anything in here. Okay, so on system we can get rid of the floppy. We don't need to change the number of processors. We just need to make sure that the acceleration is turned on. On the display we don't need to enable anything, it's got more than enough memory, it's in the green. On the storage we're going to add in a ISO image. So we're just going to browse to, I've already got an ISO image in the list from before, so I'll just use that one. And networking is our other thing. We've got, the first one is by default set to NAT, which we don't really want. We want to do is bridge it to our first network card. And then our second adapter, we want to enable it and make that an internal network. And we're going to call this switch 1. So just type in switch 1. And there's nothing on the serial ports, USB, shared folders or other interface. So that's okay. So that machine's done. To start this up, hit start, normal start. Now, people have got different ways of doing this. I tend to install the entire thing on the virtual hard drive that we've created. Some of the other teachers don't do that. What they do is they run it from the ISO image the entire time and just save the profile onto the hard drive, which does do less storage, but I've always been the person that's installed things. So A for installation, top left hand corner of the command menu. Over here, this one here, number 1. So we need to hit number 1, enter. Yes, we want to continue. And the VGA is quite okay, it's in square brackets, that's the default, so we'll just hit enter to accept that. Quiet's the default, we'll accept that. So it does the installation. Yes, we do want to create a new profile or a configuration profile. It's going to be called the default profile, just hit enter. On most of these things I'm just going to hit enter for it to accept whatever the default is. So host name, enter. Admin password, I'm just going to leave it as 0 shell. LDAP base, keep it the same. Kerberos 5 ROM, same. The network card that's going to be used for the management of this device will most likely be the one that's attached to our internal switch 1, which in our case is card number 2, which you can see there is called Ether 01, so it's the one to the right of the cursor here. So just type in 2, and if we have a look at the network diagram, so we minimize this and back to, why have I got 2 open? Looks like I've got 2 open for some reason. I do have 2 open. Don't think I need that one open. Okay. Okay, so for some reason I had 2 open, but anyway, The IP address we need here is 10.1, so it's 192.168.10.1, and the default subnet mask is correct, so just hit enter on that. And we don't need a default gateway because our first card, which is Ether00, is going to get an IP address dynamically from the NAS FG47 device because it's bridged to the outside card. So we'll just hit enter on this, hit enter to go back to the command menu or any key. What we do now is we shut this machine down, take out the ISO image and then boot it up off the hard drive that we've just installed onto. So if you look on the command menu, left hand side, third from the bottom, is H to shut down, and yes, that'll shut it down. It doesn't take very long to shut down. So if you can just change the view here so it shows the details of that virtual machine or whichever one's highlighted, and you can see that in our optical drive here we've got our zero shell ISO image. That's a hyperlink, so we can just click on that and then remove the disk from the virtual drive, and now it's empty, and we can just start it back up again. Again, this doesn't take very long to start up, it's only a couple of minutes. Okay, so we're back up again. The thing to look at here is in the command menu, bottom right hand side, I for IP manager, and we can see that our Ether01 has the address of 192.168.10.1, which is what we typed in. What we need to do is change Ether00 currently does not have an IP address, but we need to make this one dynamic because it's bridged to our card that goes out to the internet. So on the command or the command menu, right hand side, second from the bottom, H for dynamic IP configuration. Ether00 is correct, so I'm just going to hit enter. Currently says it's disabled. We need that to be enabled. And you can see that we now have an IP address given to us dynamically, just to the right of the cursor here, 192.168.47.204. Now we can't see any default gateway here, but if we quit back out to the main menu, so if we hit Q to quit back to the main menu, and then on the command menu on the right hand side, second from the top, we can press T to show the routing table. And the top line of the routing table shows us 0.0.0.0, and the gateway is 192.168.47.1, and on the far right hand side it shows us it's through interface Ether00. This is our default gateway given to us via DHCP from NAS FG47, which is 47.1. We're going to prove that we can actually ping that, so if I just press any key to return to the menu, command menu, left hand side, third from the top, S for shell prompt, and then we're going to go ping 192.168.47.1, and we're pinging the NAS FG47 in the room, and there's no reason at all why I can't ping further out into the Wollongong West network. So I will ping 172.25.104.12, and that's a DNS server that's out in the Wollongong West network. So at the moment the connectivity is quite fine, it's all good. I'll stop that with a Control X, sorry, Control C, sorry, and then Control D will get me back to the main menu, or type exit, either one. Control D, it's back to the main menu. So that's that machine set up. I'm going to minimise this out of the road. The next virtual machine that, if I just quickly have a quick look at the intermediate network protocols and the resources. Actually, it's probably on the desktop. Let's just go to the desktop. There's our network diagram. So we've just done our router here, 10.1, and we're bridged it and gone out. And we've just checked that we could actually ping our NAS FT47, so 47.1. We also pinged out here to our WWIT2 to make sure we can get to 104.12. So we're going to now look at perhaps we could do another router, or we could do some of these servers. We might just do this first server. Now, we haven't mentioned what servers we're going to put in here. My suggestion is that we not use the latest server, as in server 2016. It currently has a few issues, so we're going to remain with say server 2012 R2, and we might use one machine later on. We might use that as a server 2016, well, just for fun. Normally we have a range of servers in any environment. It's not likely that you get all of one particular type of server. So anyway, we're going to do server 2012 for server A and server B. So let's create a new server A. Server A, and we'll make this 2012 64-bit. Next. We'll initially give these 2 gigabytes of memory, but at some point in the future we're likely going to have to increase it, but we can do that later on. So next, give it a virtual hard drive, VDI format so it's native, dynamically allocated so we only use what we need, and it currently says 50 gigabytes. Yeah, we might make that 150 just for fun. We're only using what we need anyway, so let's go create, and right mouse click and look at the settings, and here we'll need to do a bit of work. So on the advanced tab for general, we need to change this to bidirectional, the shared clipboard and the drag and drop, and on the system I get rid of the floppy, and on the processors I give it an extra CPU. I also enable the no execute bit because it's a server. Make sure that acceleration's turned on, and on the display I will enable 2D and 3D acceleration if you can. You'll notice that the memory requirement, video memory requirement, all of a sudden went up to 128 meg, so that's not a bad thing to do. Storage, on the empty CD-ROM we're going to choose find a server 2012 64-bit ISO. Put that in there. The audio, not worried about that. Networking, by default VirtualBox will put it into NAT. However, we want this to be to an internal network and not to switch 1. Serial ports, USB, shared file, none of that we need to worry about. So it's mainly networking, storage, display and system for processors and things like that, and general we have the bidirectional. So they're the main areas that we need to look at for most Windows machines. So that's okay for that. We'll start that machine up. So the time will be, okay, Shift E and go to Australia. Next, install it now. What we're going to put in here is a standard edition. You notice these are all evaluation editions. What we want is the standard edition with a GUI. So it's the second one. Next. I accept the license terms and go next. It's always going to be a custom install. That's the drive we wanted on, the 150 gig drive. Go next. And we'll just let it go its own merry way for a little bit. So while it's doing that, we're going to create the other virtual machines. We're probably only going to install one of them at a time, but we can create all the additional ones. So let's go new, server B. Again, it's going to be a server 2012 64-bit. Next, leave it at 2048 megabytes. So create the hard drive, VDI format so it's native, dynamically allocated so it only uses what it needs. We'll change this to 150 gigabytes as well and go create. And we can change the configuration of this. We'll do that now and continue on making machines. So if we look at the settings, on the advanced tab we need to make sure that these are bidirectional. On the system we need to untick floppy, increase the number of processors and tick the no execute bit. Acceleration needs to be on, which it normally is. Display, we need to enable 2D and 3D acceleration and probably make sure that we got we're on the green. Storage wise, we need to add in the server 2012 64-bit ISO image, and on the networking we need to change it to an internal switch 1, and that's it pretty much. So that's server B created, and VoIP and NAS we will come back to. They're sort of specialized services. What we'll do is, so we've just done server A, we've created server B, we're actually installing server A at the moment. So VoIP and NAS we will come back to. So what I'll do now is create this router and then the Windows 10 virtual machine. And we'll come back and do VoIP and NAS a little bit later on. Okay, so minimise that out of the road. So we'll go new router. It's going to be a Linux based machine, and drag that to the top. It's going to be the 32-bit 2.6 3x 4x and go next. Cut that back to 256 megabytes. Create the disk, VDI native format, dynamically allocated, leave it at 8 gigabytes. And we'll just look at the settings on this one. So settings, we don't need to do anything on the general. On the system we untick the floppy. We don't need to increase processors or acceleration or anything. So display is the same. Storage, we're going to put the zero shell ISO image in. So that's in there. And the networking is probably the important part. So the first card, if we have a quick look at, we're looking at this one here. So the first card is going to be connecting to switch 1. The second card, if we're going from left to right, second card is going to be bridged, and the third card is going to be into switch 2. So we'll look at it that way. So first card's going to be an internal to switch 1. The second card, we're going to enable it, and we're going to bridge it, but not to the first card but to the second card. And we've already got one to that card. That was our first ADSL, so it's to this card here, the 579V. And then our third card, we're going to bridge it, sorry, no, we're going to enable it, sorry, and put it to internal network and make it switch 2. Just type the 2 in on the switch, and there's nothing else that we need to do. So click on that. So that one's ready to install. At the moment, we're currently still installing on our server A. So if we have a quick look at that, it's up to the administrator. I'm just going to use capital P password 9 because it satisfies the security requirements, and go finish. Okay, so that machine's set up. Input, keyboard, and insert a Control-Alt-Delete. You notice we can use the host and the delete key. The host key is down here, which is the right control key. So we could actually hit the right control and the delete key, and that would inject a Control-Alt-Delete into this virtual machine. So I'm just going to put it in this way. Type in capital P password 9. Whoops, 9. Okay, so that sets that machine up, and we'll come back and look at this a little bit later on. What we can do is I don't know, we can set it up now. It's pretty easy. We don't want to add roles or anything. We just want to get the basics working. So normally what I do is go to local server, and you can see the name of the machine, the work group, the firewall's on, and the IP address is DHCP'd, and we need to turn off Internet Enhanced Security Configuration. So I'll do that now. Click on that, turn it off. Whiz back to here. We can put a static IP address in, properties, and I'm going to turn off quality of service. I'm going to turn off IP version 6, and on IP version 4 we need to put in a static IP address. So looking at our diagram here, server A is going to be 10.2. That's 10.2 there. Okay. So 192.168.10.2. Subnet mask is correct. Gateway is 192.168.10.1. And the DNS is going to be itself. So I'm going to go 192.168.10.2. You'll probably find later on that that switches it to a 127.0.0.1, which is a loopback address. And once we've made it into a domain controller, we're really going to push it back to 10.2 as the actual, again, so more to remind myself than anything else. Press OK. Yep, that's all OK. So if I hit the refresh button, well, it's telling me that we've got a network, so we want to find devices. That's correct. And if I hit the refresh button on here, it'll show me that I've got a 10.2 IP address. And the firewall, I'm going to turn the firewall off as well. And hit the refresh button. So firewall's off, IP address, Internet Enhanced Security Configuration is off. The only other thing I want to do is actually change the computer name. So here I'll change the name and call it server A. And of course it'll want to do a restart. Restart now. So I'll just minimize this thing out of the road while it does a restart. And I'm going to create the the last machine I want to create today, which is the Windows 10 machine as well. So let's go new Windows 10. I'm just going to call it Win 10, will do. Picks up that it's a Windows 10 64-bit. 2048 megabytes or 2 gigabytes of memory is good. Create the hard disk now, keep it in native format and dynamically allocate it. This thing says 50 gigabytes. That's enough, because this is only going to be a client machine and it's not going to do much. We're not going to install much on it. It's just for testing purposes mainly, so we'll leave it at 50 gigabytes. Create. So there's our Windows 10 machine. We look at the settings on it, right mouse click in settings. So again, on the advanced, because it's a Windows box, we're going to set bi-directional for drag and drop and shared clipboard. And on the system, we're going to untick the floppy, give it an extra processor, but I don't turn on the no execute bit. That's really only for servers. The accelerator is turned on. The display, we're going to tick the enable 2D and 3D acceleration if you can. That'll bump the memory up to 128 megabytes, which is fine. Storage, empty CD-ROM, so we're going to put in the Windows 10 Pro 64, that'll do. And on the network, we need to make this thing internal network, but not switch 1, switch 2. Okay, so that's switch 2. Okay, so we've created the virtual machines. Our server A should be up and running again, which it is. So hit a Control Delete and type in password 9. It's up and running again. When I click on the local server, we can see it's now called server A, which is what we wanted. So that machine's set up as far as we want to at the moment. We could actually do things like you know, pinging and things like that. So if we had a search and went CMD and right mouse click on that and open file location, I can send that to the desktop. Same thing with the administrative tools and probably control panel as well. Yeah, that'll do. File Explorer, might as well. Okay, so we've got those things on the desktop. So if I open up the command prompts and do an IP config, you'll see that I've got my IP address and my gateway is 10.1. I'm going to ping my gateway 192.168.10.1. I can ping my gateway and it responds, which is good. Now, until I put NAT on here, my server won't be able to ping any further than 10.1. It could ping 47.204, which is the IP address of this card here, because it's on the same device, but I wouldn't be able to ping any further out until I actually put NAT on this interface. And the way I would do that is by web browsing into it, which we can do now. So if I minimize that out of the road, I'm going to just minimize this and I'll come back to it in a minute. And if I open up my Internet Explorer and let's just pin that to the taskbar. So now it's down here. If I open that up, don't use recommended settings and ask me later. We'll get a message on here that says turn on the Internet Enhanced Security Configuration. Now we deliberately turned that off so that it wouldn't get in the road, so I'm not going to change that at the moment. I am going to change the tools and internet options, and I'm going to set my home page just to, so like Google, doesn't everyone? And then connections and then LAN settings. I want to turn on my proxy server. So I want to use proxy.det.nsw.edu.au, and port 80 is correct. Now we do need to bypass the proxy server for local addresses, and by that I mean I want to web browse into my ADSL at the front, and that's a local address. So I'm going to bypass the server for local addresses, and on the advanced I can tell it what we need to bypass. So I'm going to bypass everything that starts with a 192 dot star. So anything that starts with a 192, it's not going to go to the proxy server. It's not going to go here. It's going to go directly to it without going to the proxy server. So we go OK on that, OK on that, OK there. And I'm going to go 192.168.10.1, which is my gateway, which is my zero shell. And it says that we've got a security certificate issue, but we don't care. Continue to the website, which is not recommended. And this is our zero shell, which is our ADSL at the front. So here, admin, and the password is zero shell. And we're going to tell it yes to remember it. So here is us web browsed into zero shell. I'm just going to, I've got our command prompt here because I just want to run the ping again to see if I could get out to 172.25.104.12, which, if you remember, I'm here, that's pinging out to WWIT2 over here. So it's going out through the ADSL, through the NAS box, and to the DNS server out in the Wollongong West IT Labs, which is about as far as we can go before we actually get out to the internet. Okay. And when I do that, of course it doesn't get there. We get a request timeout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that to one side here so we can see what it's doing, and I'm going to up arrow so I can do that. And if I put a -T at the end of that ping request, it'll just keep on going forever. So it's going to, request timeout forever until it finds it. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix it, and you'll see the changes in here. So at the moment, what we need to do is on our NAS here, we've just web browsed into it. We need to set up NAT on this interface and RIP on this interface. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So we go down to router. You can see this thing still request timeouting. I'm going to go to NAT, and I'm going to put ether00 into the NAT enabled interfaces and hit save. I'm also going to put RIP, which is currently disabled. I'm going to enable it, and I'm going to put ether01 into the RIP enabled interfaces and hit saves. Now what I need to do is, you can see this thing's still not working. What I need to do is reboot this router, and it will come up as a NAT router, which will then allow this through. So let's go reboot. You should see a change here in that, not request timed out, in that I just can't find it. If we have a quick look here at that virtual machine, it's stopped. Starting back up again. And you'll notice now we're actually getting a reply. Okay, so it's now a NAT router and it's working. Okay, that's what we wanted to see. So I hit Control C on that to stop it. Now that this thing can actually, you know, our command prompt from our server here can ping through this, because we've just turned NAT on and rebooted it. It can ping through this NAS box and get out to our WWIT2 machine. If we can get out to there, which is only one step away from the internet, then we can obviously get out to the internet as well. So we're going to try that, because that was definitely 104.12. So we're just going to add another tab here, and we're going to go to Google. So you hit the home button. It says the proxy server is not responding. Okay, maybe I spelt proxy wrong or something like that. Let's have a quick look. Connections. proxy.det.nsw.edu.au. Can't see anything wrong with that. Sometimes I put commas in instead of full stops. Just make sure that's a full stop. Yeah, it must be. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll exit out of this, close all tabs, and we'll come back in and have another look. Now, if I remember, I've got this attached to down here, and it's still saying I've got problems. Okay, so let's go trace route. -D to take out DNS requests to www.google.com.au. Okay, so it's unable to resolve what the IP address is, which means we've actually got a DNS error. So that tells us what the problem is. So I need to go back and fix our DNS issues. So if I go back to the actual network card itself, DNS is only pointed back at itself, so it doesn't know how to name resolve. So what I need to do is change the settings on the card. Instead of being 10.2, let's point that to 47.1, which is the NAS box, and alternatively 172.25.104.12, which is the Wollongong West DNS server. So I'm talking about the room DNS server and then the Wollongong West DNS server. So I'll put those two in and whiz back to here and hit home, and it gets out. So if I just click on the images and go fox, I get pictures of foxes. So it's obviously working, and I can still get to 10.1, which is trying to close the tab. Do you want to close the tab? No. So why did that try and close the tab? Let's go to 192.168.10.1 and then type in admin and 0 shell. And you can see I can get out to the internet, and I can also get to the local machine as well. So the NAT is working. It's allowing us to get further out and out to the internet. So as a basis, that means that this thing is now sort of set up. We've put RIP on it. We've got the IP address on it. It's got NAT. So this thing's reasonably set up for the moment. Later on, we'll look at putting port forwarding in and setting up VPN termination and things like that. But that's after we've got all the other machines installed and working. So server getting out through this device and out to the internet, and also able to web browse into it. So we're ready to install server B and the router here and Windows 10. So we'll just sort of go one at a time, I imagine. So minimise this out of the road, minimise that out of the road. We're up to server B. So if we start him up, we've got all the right things plugged in, I think. I'm going to do something slightly naughty. I'm going to install these things in parallel. So my router is only tiny. So while this one's paused for the moment, like it's not actually doing anything, I'm going to start this one up as well. Normally you would not install two devices or two virtual machines in parallel, especially if you're on spinning hard drives. The files will get badly fragmented and slow the machines right down. I'm installing this onto a solid state drive, so file fragmentation is not an issue, and it doesn't slow down anyway, so you can do that. So on the router, A for installation, 1 for the hard drive, type in yes, enter for the VGA, enter for quiet, it installs it. Yes, we do want a configuration. Default profile, enter default for most of these things. And the interfaces we're going to use, we're currently on seem to be setting up the zero shells from our server A, which if you have a look at our network diagram here, it's going to be interface 1 that's connected to switch 1 where our server A is. So I'm going to make this the management interface. Okay. So that's going to be number 1. And I'm going to change that to 192.168.10.254 according to our network diagram. We've got 10.254 just there in the middle. So 10.254, mask is correct, and the gateway is 192.168.10.1. And back to the menu, H to shut it down, yes. And on this one we can click on the zero shell and remove the disk and then start it back up again. Back onto server B, we just need to shift E to get back to Australia. Next, install now. Make it a standard server evaluation with a GUI, which is the second one. Next. Accept the requirements. Next. Custom, always custom install. It's the 150 gig drive. Next, and just let it run. So it's going to run in the background. My zero shell is empty. I've restarted it. That's this one here. So if we go I for IP manager, we can see that we've got 10.254 for the Ether 00, and looking at our network diagram, number 2 needs to be 30.1 and number 3 needs to be 20.1, and we need to set up DHCP on this and RIP on this, okay? But we need to web browse in to do those. We could actually web browse in because our server's here and we've got 10.254, so we could actually do the other two once we've webbed in as well. So we might do that just for fun. So while we could set IP addresses and everything on this router via the command line like this, we could, we're going to web browse in just for fun, just make it different. So back to our server B is in the middle of doing things, and server A, we're going to just open up another tab. We're going to go 192.168.10.254. We're going to continue to that website, type in admin, and the password is 0shell, and log in. Set yes. If we go to the setup and to the network, we can see here that's our first card, 10. And on our second card here, we could add an IP address and put 192.168.30.1 and go OK. And the third card is going to be 20.1. You'll notice here we've got VLANs capability, so we could actually allocate VLANs to particular Ethernet adapters as well. We don't need to in this particular case, but you could create a VLAN, edit it, remove it. So it's not only IP addresses, but you can also do VLANs, and you can actually allocate multiple VLANs to a network card as well. So we've now allocated the IP addresses. If we went back to here, quit out to the main menu and came back in again, we can see that we've got our IP addresses now are allocated. So just to the right of the cursor here, you can see we've got 30.1, and down here on Ether 02 we've got 20.1. They were the things that we entered in the web browser, so that's working. Now the other two things that we needed to do was we needed to set RIP on here and DHCP on this interface over here. So let's just do that. So if we go down to router and look at RIP version 2, we're going to enable it for Ether 00. Put that in there and then hit save. And just to show you what the RIP does, we've now got the RIP on both interfaces of both routers that are connected to switch 1. If I have a look at my routing table, you can see here I've got a 47 subnet that's been inserted into the routing table here via the RIP protocol. Okay, now that route in the routing table has been given to it by 10.1, which is the ADSL. If I was looking at the ADSL, which is this one here, 10.1, and look at its routing table, you'll see I've now got 20 and 30 are subnets that have been put into its routing table via RIP, which means that the router has inserted these two routing table entries into the routing table on the ADSL. Okay, and we can see that in order to get to the 20 subnet, you have to go to 10.254, which is the address of the router. And the same to get to the 30 subnet, you need to go to there as well. And it's through Ethernet, Ether 01 interface, and it's been put in there via RIP. Okay, so that just shows you that RIP's working. Now the other thing we needed was DHCP on the third interface, which is the 20 subnet, which is that thing there. So what we're going to look at is DHCP, and we're going to go new, and the available interfaces are going to be the whoops, I'm in the wrong router, aren't I? I'm in the wrong router. I need to be on that router. So DHCP on that one, and new. And when I drop it down, it's the 20 subnet, or Ether 02, that I want to put the DHCP on. I go OK. And here I set the range, so 192.168.20. Say 100 to 200. And 20.1 is the right gateway, but it's not the right DNS. The DNS needs to be, what we're going to put in is 10.2, which is the local server, or server A. It's going to be server A's address. I'm going to put in one additional one. I could actually put another 2 in, just so that our Windows 10 machine here can get out to the internet, because it'll have DNS resolution. So this thing, DNS, is going to give the IP address and everything to this Windows 10 machine. Currently, it only knows about this is a DNS server, because I just put it in, but it isn't actually a DNS server yet, so it's not working. So I actually need to give it a working DNS server so they can actually resolve and get out to the internet. So I'm going to give it the NAS FG47 IP address. So I'm going to give it 192.168.47.1. That all looks okay, and I'm going to hit save. And so now DHCP is set up on the router for the network card that's plugged into switch 2, which will give an IP address out to our Windows 10 machine. So let's go back to, minimise that out of the road, back to our server B. It's ready to go, so we'll call it password 9. And finish. So if I go input and keyboard, Control-Alt-Delete, type in password 9, and again this machine here, it'll automatically run the server manager, and then we can set up the things that we did the same as the last time. So local server, enhanced security configuration, that's currently on, let's turn it off. Let's set an IP4 address. Let's get rid of quality of service and IP version 6. Let's go to IP version 4. Give it a static IP address of 192.168.10.3, based on the fact that server B is 10.3. Subnet mask is correct, and a gateway of 192.168.10.1, and a preferred DNS server of 192.168.10.2, which is going to fail because it's not a DNS server yet, but we will put in 192.168.47.1, which is our NAS box, which is working. So that's an IP address. Yes, it's found the network, and we need to change the name here and turn off the firewall. So let's turn off the firewall. Okay, that's off. Hit the refresh button. That's off, and we've got an IP address. So it's just a matter of changing this. Before I do that, I'm just going to minimize and come back to it, because I want to change that and put the pin to the taskbar, and I want to just see if it gets out to the internet, which it should do. I'll set the internet options default. I'll call this one www.dogpile.com, just to be different, and the connections will be LAN settings, proxy server, proxy.det.nsw.edu.au. Port number 8 is correct. I'm not even going to bother setting up bypassing on this one because we've got server A to do it. It gets out to Dogpile, so it's obviously working. If I look at images and I go cat, I get cats, so it's working. Okay, so as all we need to do now is back here and change the actual name of the machine and let it reboot. So we call this one server B. Okay. Yes, we want to restart. So it's going to restart. So we've got those three going, the router going. We need to just install Windows 10. It does have an ISO in there, so we can start it. Now the good thing about this one is that it should be able to get out to the internet pretty well straight away, because we've got DHCP set up and routing and all the rest of it. So we'll see how it goes. Shift E, make it Australia. Next, install now. I'm going to skip it. Accept the license agreement and go next. Install custom onto the 50 gig drive, next. So now it's just a matter of waiting until this has finished installing, and then we will check to make sure it gets out to the internet by getting a DHCP IP address, and with all the settings, if they're set correctly on the DHCP server, this machine will get straight out. So I'll just pause this at the moment and we'll come back to it when it's ready. Doesn't look. Okay, we just go back to our Windows 10 machine and have a little look. Okay, it looks like it's doing a restart. You can see the hard drives going down here. Resized, yep. Okay, so the disk is still in there obviously, but we didn't press it, so we can actually get rid of the disk by taking the disk out this way. So now when you have a look at it, the disk's not in. Enter the product key. I'm going to do this later. I'm going to use custom settings. I'm going to turn all these things off, mainly because I don't want all this stuff going back to Microsoft. So is that last little one? Okay, so he's going to use this. I don't know. Yoda will do because it's only 4 letters. Passwords. Password 9. Password 9. Enter as usual. Next. Okay, it's doing the usual setting up type stuff. Bit tedious this part. Okay, so it looks like we're now in. If I do a quick search for iExplore, that's the Internet Explorer. I'm going to open the file location and I'm going to send it to the taskbar. So there it is. And the other thing I really want is the command prompt as well. Let's go CMD. Again, we'll go right mouse click, open the file location, send it to the desktop. I'm a bit like that, I like everything on the desktop. Click on it and then send it. Okay. So let's just set the internet options on here. www.google. Because everyone does. And then our LAN settings will set the proxy. proxy.det.nsw.edu.au, port number 80, and I'll just hit the home button and see if I get out, and I do. If I look at images and go say BMW because it's only 3 letters, I get BMWs. So this thing's out to the internet, which is great. If I look at my command prompts, and I'll just make it a little bit bigger, make the font large, that looks good, and go ipconfig we can see that I've got an IP address of 20.100, and if I up arrow and do a slash all, we can see that the default gateway is 20.1 and the DHCP server is 20.1, which is our router. So our router has given us 20.100, and you can see also our DNS server is set to 47.1, which means if I go ping www, say University of Wollongong.edu.au, it resolves the name back to an IP address, but it can't ping it. That's because pings aren't allowed through the TAFE system, but DNS requests are, so DNS is definitely working. So if I trace routed the same thing, -D, so it doesn't do DNS lookups, and went www.universityofwollongong.edu.au. Oops, helps if I can spell University of Wollongong, doesn't it? It name resolves, it pings to the router, to the ADSL at the front, to NAS FG47, and then gets to an isolation network, and doesn't get a response from 104.1 because we're not allowed to ping through the Wollongong West network's gateway, which is 104.1, into the TAFE system. So I can't get into the TAFE system. My pings are stopped at this particular point, which means I can't ping anything further out. I.e. I can't ping out to Google or anything like that. But within the network, it's all working. I'm pinging through my system, out into the Wollongong West system, out through the room system and into the Wollongong West system, and that's all working. So our DHCP worked for this machine. That shows now that we've got our Windows 10 machine pinging through the router, through the ADSL, through the NAS, and can ping things out into this network here. So I'd be able to ping 172.25.104.12, this device here, without any problems. So if I did that, ping 172.25.104.12, and it pings quite fine. What it doesn't do is doesn't ping through the TAFE system, but it does name resolve, and it does get out to the internet, which is what we wanted it to do. Okay, so that's the initial setup that we wanted to do. So we've done our ADSL, our server A can get out to the internet, our server B, don't know whether we checked whether it can get out to the internet, but I think it does. We've put our router in, and we put our Windows 10 device in, and all of those can get out to the internet. Let's just check our server B just to make sure. Password 9. We may not have set it up yet. Let's have a look. www. Yahoo.com.au. Okay. Connections and settings. We do have that in. And it does, it gets out, so we know that all of the machines that are in our internal network are actually getting out to the internet, which is what they're supposed to do. I think what we got up to the last time here was we just changed the name and done a reboot on server B. We've setting the proxy and it's out, so that's not a problem. Okay.